Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. In today's episode, Sona and I will be breaking down the second episode of the third season of The White Lotus, an episode called Special Treatments. Sona, what's your favorite special treatment when you go to a spa?
I don't know if it qualifies as a special treatment. It's pretty standard, but I love a deep tissue massage,
Mm.
the kind that has the level of pressure where you think maybe the massage therapist is angry at you for some reason. Like it really kind of hurts. I really enjoy that.
The older son here in the of this Ratcliff family enjoys the deep tissue massage as well. A little too much. A little too much. Speaking of the Schwarzenegger actor, they're trying to make him a thing. Did you also see this ad that popped up? Oh, you may not have ads on your Max account. I have ads on my Max account because I'm on the free the Black Friday deal, and the advertisement that ran before this episode of TV was Patrick Schwarzenegger making a Tanqueray martini. Have you seen this? And they call it the White Lotus. It's like a promotion
No,
for
I didn't see
Thailand.
it.
It's a promotion for, it's like, oh, a taste of Thailand. Like the girl drinks it at the bar. She's like transported to Thailand. So I'm like, this is like a travel promotion. They mentioned the White Lotus. The cocktail's called the White Lotus. It's a Tanqueray commercial, obviously. And of course, it stars him. And she even says, it's like not even like he's playing a part. She goes, "Aren't you an actor? Why are you bartending?" So it's
Interesting. No, I didn't see that. It doesn't mean it didn't play. I didn't.
he just walked away. Maybe he just walked out of the room.
Exactly.
I was wondering if you get the same ads that I get. But obviously, this ad was made specifically for people who are watching The White Lotus.
Yeah.
So
Very targeted.
very targeted. Yeah. And I assume this is something that happened very recently. An update on our YouTube numbers. We have a challenge to the audience for anybody out there. I know if you listen to all of our conversations, you're getting bored of hearing this, but most people only dip into these episodes, and I've only been announcing it for a week, so I do want to mention it. Sona, we have now almost 60 this morning. We were just shy of 60 subscribers. So we're trying to get to 100.
I like it.
We're getting there. So we'll get to 100 within a week or two if the numbers stay, and I think they're gonna peter out. So please do, if you haven't already subscribed. I'll include the link in the show notes once again, or just simply search go to YouTube and just search for "Need Some Introduction." One word. Is hard to find for some reason. Probably because we are so low profile on there. We've only been on there for a very short period of time. And, the more activity we get, the more we'll rank higher. And you don't have to listen to us there unless you choose to, but feel free to give us feedback there too. People have been posting comments, and we do appreciate the feedback. If that's an easier way to communicate with us, great. Please do respond there. We do appreciate all the feedback. And yeah, if we get to 100, we will have a video episode. I'm pretty sure at one point, to be honest, I didn't think we would get to 100. It was kind of like, let's see. I'm pretty certain we'll get there, whether it's going to be 1 week or 3 weeks. Like I said, it'll probably slow down over time, but I think we'll probably get there sooner rather than later. So, and we'll figure out what we're going to do. Probably just one of these conversations between Sona and I, but in video format.
Well, what I like about the YouTube comments is that you're actually able to respond to them, which you can't do
right
on the iPhone podcast app. I definitely see certain comments on the app where it's kind of like, I'm not sure this person left the comment on the right show, or
right.
and other things that, we would just like, there's a very easy way to clarify why there's a disconnect, but we can't because we can't respond to the comments. So I like that this allows for a little bit of a back and forth.
Yes, this is a huge frustration for me, by the way. Anybody who's ever left us a negative review on Apple Podcasts, maybe people just assume that we can have a conversation there. There is no communication on there. So it's just posted forever. I cannot give you feedback. So if you post there, you either have to hear me talk about it here. So once again, emailing is always great. We prefer that. And I, by the way, am completely open to negative feedback as well. I would prefer it in an email so we can have a back and forth about it. And then if I ignore you, sure, go and post a negative review. But maybe, Sona, you may make a valid point here that maybe people do think there's some back and forth on there. That's just you post. That's all. I cannot communicate. I cannot edit your reviews. I cannot correct them. They simply are out there forever. So if you have something negative to say, at least say it on YouTube so I can respond to you. Oh, so Paradise, which we're covering here on the show, a couple of pieces of news for Paradise. They've announced that they renewed it for season 2. Not too
I
surprised
heard
that
that.
that happened. And the second thing is, if you've been curious to watch this show, obviously we're not going to cover it once again, but until season 2 comes along, we probably will cover it at that point. They just announced that starting next month, as soon as the wrap up happens, like the very next week after the season finale on Hulu, they will start running this on Tuesday nights, I think, on ABC. So you'll be able to watch this on TV.
Nice.
Sona, as I mentioned, this feels like network TV. I think it'll be very popular on network TV. You can watch that there if anybody wants to. And of course, just bookmark or just remember that we have that backlog of episodes and then listen to them then. Don't spoil your stuff yet. It's definitely a show that literally every episode is going to have a hook in it. So you don't want to listen ahead before you watch it. But yeah, it'll be easily available to anybody with a television within about a month. So it's coming. And the finale, of course, is coming in just 2 weeks. And we'll cover that here, obviously. I finished 0 Day. Sona, did you watch any of 0 Day, by the way?
I didn't, although I did see a commercial for it after we talked, and I thought, oh, there it is.
Oh, that's that thing he talked about.
Right.
While I was getting myself a snack. No, I'm just kidding. I did finish it. The ending is a little discombobulated in whatever it's trying to say, so I do see where some of the criticism came in with. But I found it very entertaining, and I basically watched it in a couple of nights. So it is the number one show in the world, as is the case with these Netflix shows. So I think it's full of hooks and entertaining and says some interesting things. It gets dumber and less on point and really confused in whatever it's trying to say politically by the end. Intentionally so. I don't think they'd want to offend nobody. So they come up with this very mushy philosophy by the end. But I think until they get there and they have to kind of say something, I guess they feel they need to say something. I think all that ambiguity kind of just speaks to the fact that we're all talking past each other. We all don't understand each other. And you don't even have to think about the philosophy of the show. I think it's just as a thriller, it's pretty fun to watch. That's my opinion. If you like political thrillers, some kind of conspiracy, some big ticking clock, something's going to happen. We have to unravel this mystery before something apocalyptic is going to happen. It is pretty fun to watch. So, and it's 6 episodes, pretty small investment of time. All right. So I think that's all of the housekeeping I had. Did you have anything you wanted to watch or shout out?
No, I'm being kept pretty busy between Severance and White Lotus right now. So
I'm keeping you busy for sure.
Mm-hmm.
2 whole shows you got to watch. I watch 2 shows a day. You watch 2 shows, period.
I know you're knocking out 5+ movies a week. And
I fell off last week. I did watch no movies. I was doing so well, and I just not a single movie last week.
Welcome to the struggle.
Exactly. Okay, so here we are. Special treatments. What do you think about this title? I was thinking how interesting it is that, of course, everybody gets a treatment this week, but, there's the whole idea of whether you deserve special treatment, whether certain people get special treatment. So what do you think it might be trying to say thematically on this episode, or maybe more in the show itself?
I love thinking about the titles of shows. Yeah, I did not give this one all that much thought, but I think there's possibly an idea of people being singled out for getting a special treatment, but not necessarily in a good way, in more of like a shady way, being the target of a scheme or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the original thing that is much more on the surface of how they're, doing this analysis of your body chemistry and designing a plan for you, or whether you need meditation to try and heal the traumas of the past. And, there was a lot of discussion of targeting treatments to people based on their personal histories.
One general thing I wanted to bring up about the episode. Did you notice that it's kind of hard to see even because the English subtitles are obviously presented on the screen? But do you notice behind the subtitles?
Yes.
Are other subtitles?
Yes. I don't know if they're Thai or a different language.
Mm-hmm.
And it's beautiful the way they've done it.
Beautiful
because it's
text,
kind
right?
of translucent, right? And the lettering is so pretty. But yeah, I can't figure out what they're trying to say by doing that, because I think it's pretty obvious that most of us are not going to understand it.
I watch a lot of movies, obviously, and there have definitely been films I've seen where this happens. So I guess there's just definitely something they're imitating where I'm watching a film. It might be Thai movies, but I don't think it's Thai movies. But oftentimes it'll be maybe from a region where they have multiple dialects. So
Sure,
you'll actually
yes.
see that certain dialogue is actually translated on the screen because characters
Sure.
might be speaking a different dialect. And then, of course, that is obscured by the English subtitles that are now laid over all of that. I think they're trying to imitate that style, or maybe
Yeah.
not imitate it. I mean, I assume this will play there. And they are doing this as a stylistic. Obviously, the language is very pretty. So there's definitely an aspect to how aesthetic that is. But maybe it just serves a straight ahead function as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you were saying that just now, it reminded me of when I watched a movie in Morocco. The movie was dubbed, it was an American movie. It was dubbed into French, and then the subtitles were in Arabic.
Great.
With my husband and I speaking neither French nor Arabic. So the irony of us watching an English movie that we could not
You couldn't
understand.
understand at all.
But it was an action movie, so the dialogue wasn't super
it was probably good
important.
enough.
Here, I haven't paid a specific attention to it, but I think it's when people are speaking Thai, right? That these
Yes.
subtitles come
Yeah.
up. So it'd be weird if to then subtitle it in Thai, but I don't know.
If anyone out there happens to know, I'd love to hear this. I'm just now in this moment thinking about the fact that perhaps they speak in a different dialect, and that might be telling us something about
Maybe.
the class or something of
Right. I haven't
these
been
people.
paying attention to who it is
Right.
that's talking when they do it.
Maybe it is even indicative of that. So yeah, if anybody knows more, please let us know. We'd love to hear feedback because I even Googled it and like nothing came back. I'm sure it'll become more of a conversation piece as the show progresses, though. And I want to get into the plot breakdown. I'm going to break it up based on different characters.
Sure.
And once again, Sona, maybe the ones I care about the most and the ones I don't. And maybe we could have a power ranking of what you care most about in this show. Because maybe some of that is shifting, actually, which is kind of interesting and maybe intentional as well. Before we get into that, obviously something thematically that's happening here with the show is this idea that this resort is a paradise, obviously, but a limbo as well for all of these people. And I think that is something that's being explored here. But I think over and over again on this show, it's like people go to this paradise in a way, and maybe this is what we all do when we go on these vacations, is to put your life on pause, and how maybe that's an impossibility. And maybe it is how people enter and then exit this liminal space. What is happening to them there, the transformation that might occur, or maybe the lack of transformation, right? And maybe that is some of the commentary or the judgment of these individual characters. And how do you think that works for, in general for us, giving ourselves this space potentially to take advantage of it, or maybe not? Maybe sometimes, like for some of these people, it's catastrophic, this attempt at it.
Yeah, well, you reminded me of a really super challenging time in my life when I was dealing with a very complicated infertility situation. I was in a very dark place, and life goes on, and you try and live life as normal and take vacations and all of that. And you think like, oh, finally a getaway from thinking about all of this stuff that is consuming me. And when you go away, you realize why someone coined the phrase, wherever you go, there you are, because really you can't run away from any of it. Right. I think it's very hard when you are truly struggling with something to shut it out, as much as our human impulse is to try and run away from it and shut it out. Look at this paradise you're in and appreciate it and forget about all your troubles. You can look at the paradise and appreciate it, but my personal experience is that you don't forget all your troubles. They just come with you.
Maybe that's, and we're only 2 episodes in, but that's maybe a little bit of my criticism of the show so far, is that it feels a little bit samey, where everybody is about to face catastrophe or pretending that things are great when they're really not. But it's like kind of like they're in on it. It's not like anyone's having a revelation. And I would need, and maybe it'll come, where imagine someone's truly having a transcendent experience. Somebody is coming in there at the lowest point of their lives and having the full experience of this in a positive way as a counterpoint to these people whose lives may be potentially going down in flames, running away from things they can't, or how the outside world keeps intervening. And I feel like right now, and once again, we're only 2 episodes in, this is a little too samey for me, but I would like to see more of that, of these diversity in those experiences.
I think there is still time for that to develop. And I think if you look at a character like Chelsea, she is in a very different space than, say, the 3 middle-aged women who are off together. So I think there is some diversity, and I think it will develop further. I'm not sure in what direction. I am not having that problem with the show right now.
You know what? You bring up Chelsea, and we'll talk about her in much more detail, especially in relation to that relationship she's in. Maybe I am speaking out of turn here because she is there for the experience. And in a way, she is becoming a guru to her boyfriend as well. So maybe she is that balance. And, maybe it's just too early for me to fully appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point. She really does bring a different perspective here compared to almost everybody else on the show.
Yes, fair.
And what do you think the show might be saying? There is something obviously about these people who are exoticizing the people that are there, the culture that are there. In general, Asia, I think this is something that is seen throughout the history of the West and the East.
I mean, I have a lot to say about that subject. And even, it was touched on here with the idea of the wise Indian, right?
Yes.
So I think there is a lot of, I'm not going to get the word right, exoticization, exotification.
I think I said it correctly the first time, but now I can't remember how I said it.
So I think a lot of that goes on from a Western perspective. And I think there is some truth to it. There's beauty to it. It's a very different lifestyle than what we have in the West, a different set of priorities, a different rhythm of life. It's not that it's conjured out of thin air, but there's so much else that goes along with it that I think Western people, it's not convenient for them to acknowledge it or see it. So a lot of people, for me personally, when they talk about India, will talk about what a beautiful place it is and, oh, the amazing food and the jewelry and the clothes and all of that. And all of that is so true. But there's also poverty. There's also political strife. There's also the caste system. There's also a lot of racism within India itself. There's a lot of religious persecution. There's the way they treat women is absolutely horrifying on the whole. And I'll say to somebody, well, it's a complicated place, and they just kind of shrug it off because it's inconvenient to talk about that part of it.
It's also not the fantasy version of it, right? I think that's totally true, that what happens, part of the reason you go to these exotic locales is that the otherness in and of itself, yes, it allows you to think in a different way. That's the most positive read of it. But it also is like the otherness of it itself makes it a novelty. And in a way, it becomes also the negative side of being a novelty, right? That it is just the otherness of it. It makes you think like, oh, this must be deep because it's something you don't know, but not without the context of course, well, if you lived in this context all your life, it wouldn't matter as much. Like even something where I was joking about like, oh, Belinda gets to work here. And you reminded me that like, yeah, she lives in Hawaii. I'm like, true. Like me going to Hawaii would be like, wow, I get to work in Hawaii. This is incredible. Right. So it's all about the current context, but sometimes just being in a different context, of course, can be great for your headspace to force yourself into a different, and it's proven that it's true that by forcing yourself to be in a different routine, it does reset you to some extent. But then that can go too far where it just starts to be, and I think about that a little bit even in this episode where they're doing the dance, they're performing for them, and they're like, ooh, is he in a loincloth? Oh my God, ooh, he's almost naked. The culture is a performance because that's tourists' version of it, which then of course lends to this simplified view of the culture from the attendees as well.
tourism is a huge industry, first of
Yeah.
all. For many countries, it's to everybody's benefit to capitalize on the things that people want to see and the experiences they want to have. But oh, it's just such a complicated conversation there. And I personally have not been to Thailand, so I can't say anything about Thailand specifically. I mean, everything I'm relaying is about India.
Right.
Things are generally a lot more complicated than they seem, and it's not all mysticism and Zen and karma. I mean, karma can be violent, to be honest with you, but you get my point.
Well, karma can definitely be violent for sure. So
yeah, what I'm saying is like this Eastern idea of spirituality and the beauty and the peacefulness of that, which is a real thing that exists, but not in a vacuum. It exists alongside a lot of other complicated concepts.
You mentioned it already, but I do want to circle back to the point that Chelsea does mention to Rick. There's obviously some negative connotations to this as well, or at least an oversimplification. But I will vouch for the fact that having a good talk with a wise Indian woman on a regular basis is pretty beneficial.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
And also excellent proofreader for my YouTube responses.
I think what we saw from him was evidence that he does need to be talking to someone about something.
Oh my God, absolutely. Yes.
So why not a wise Indian woman?
Or anybody at all. If that's the excuse, then go for it. But I do want to start where the episode starts off. We continue directly from where we left off last week, where it's the three women in the same configuration. That was we left them last week. And it's interesting too that, we have an extra day here on the show that we do see the day rise on the next day, but we do continue a little bit with the previous day. So slight variation in the recipe here for the show.
And I thought it was interesting, the three ladies at the end. So one of them says like, what a great first day. So yes. I thought like, oh, I would have considered the prior day, the first day, but I guess your travel day is not necessarily your first.
Especially when you've been traveling as far as you have. You probably don't do much.
Yeah.
Probably don't do much on that first day other than eat and then go to sleep. These
and
women hung out.
Yeah. They did. They've made several references to jet lag. So yes. People are definitely feeling it.
So this is a really interesting scene. I did have a bunch of questions. Most importantly, Sona, do kids who are raised in New York City have no childhood and start sucking each other off at 8 years old? Is that true?
Oh my God. First of all, I felt so called out by this episode between the wise Indian person reference and the who would raise a child in the city. This again could be an episode all its own. I could talk forever about why one would choose to raise a child in the city. And I will say it's not for everybody. And the city kids are built different. But I don't think they're built different in that way. My God, that was horrifying as somebody whose child is turning 8 years old this week. In some ways, they do grow up faster. In other ways, though, I think sometimes the real troublemakers are the suburban kids.
Oh, I can vouch. There's trouble everywhere.
I did think it's a very typical conversation that people have about raising kids in the city. So it was fun to see it portrayed that way. But I am ready anytime anybody would like to discuss the merits of raising a child in the city and why we have made the decisions we've made. I'm happy to expound on it and, knock wood, so far, so good.
I also like the fact that this conversation between Kate and Jacqueline gets interrupted by Laurie with this great jump scare.
Yes.
Jacqueline's response to this afterwards was, I thought it was a monkey that was, and I'm like, is this another clue? I'm suspicious of these monkeys. Let's blame the monkeys.
It really feels like it.
And I want to talk about the dynamic here with the women. We can just kind of do it all at once rather than kind of go step by step. We obviously are continuing this alignment between Jacqueline and Kate. But then, as we talked about in now 2 episodes now, when we talked about Severance as well, the slippery nature of the triangle when you have these different dynamics in the power that shifts. There's a dynamic shift later on where Laurie and Kate are now talking about Jacqueline.
Right.
We also discover a lot of things. We find out in that initial conversation that Laurie's daughter, this kind of idealized version of the raising of her beautiful daughter. They comment, of course, they continuously comment when anybody leaves the room. She looks great. Her daughter looks great. It's always like who looks great. But and apparently the daughter has been having some issues. She's going through a divorce. They called her husband a loser. Her career as a partner, I don't know if she's a lawyer or not. Did they? I don't know if they explicitly say that.
Yeah, I was wondering if that had been explicit and I missed it. It sounded like she's a lawyer from the conversation they're having.
Yeah, that partners, and it sounds like that. But of course, there are other businesses that have similar structures. But sure. I was thinking lawyer right away. Another thing that resonated with you, Sona.
Yes.
So all of that negative take on her life. But then, of course, as we are listening to this, at least me, I'm thinking, well, why is she, who's having all the success, literally at the peak of her success, why is she so insecure about this, even in having to put her friend down? But then, of course, later on, when they get into this competition of who had the better, body fat percentages, and the later conversation where they're talking about she's like so in love with her husband and he's so fit and he looks so great. I'll never get tired of being physical with him. And then, of course, you ask yourself, why is she talking about it so much? They even have Kate bring up the fact that they're rarely in the same town at the same time, which, of course, is something we see with celebrities, right? Where these people are married to each other. We made that joke about Nicole Kidman, who's so busy all the time that she's like never actually with her husband. So they've only spent about 8 days together. So, of course, they're still together married because they don't have
madly in love.
Yeah, they're only at their 7th date in their 10-year marriage. So it all works out. What do you think about all these different aspects of it?
Well, the daughter throws furniture, apparently, which does sound stressful. I loved the way they are exploring that triangle dynamic, which we started talking about last week, that it's so easy when you have a threesome to have two turn on the third person, turn against the third person. So with the threesome reference, it sounded like I was starting to take this to a different
it could go any way at this point between the shows we're watching currently.
People can turn on each other easily. I like that they were showing that this isn't kind of like an entrenched thing where the two of them have always thought of the third as like the loser, right? In the beginning, Jacqueline and I'm going to mix up their names, Jacqueline and Kate against.
You could say the actresses' names if it's easier. But yeah, it was Jacqueline and Kate versus Lori.
I was going to say Lori and then I thought Lauren. Okay. In the beginning, Jacqueline and Kate against Lori. It's not like an entrenched thing where she's always been kind of like the loser friend, tag along, whatever, because by the end of the second episode, it's Lori and Kate against Jacqueline saying, why does her face look sandblasted or whatever it may be, making fun of how she talks about her husband and all of that. Just kind of is a rotating thing, depending on who has decided to go to bed early, who gets talked about behind their back.
Kate is also, to mention Kate, they haven't really had that moment yet where they are turned on her, but I inevitably
think it's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. But the show has already taken some digs at her, first of all, in the fact that she approaches the other family and is completely dismissed by the Parker Posey character.
And talk about not being able to read a room, Kate. Holy cow.
I know.
Just get walk away.
Yes. Like, good to see you again, and walk away. Yeah. End of story.
So funny to run into you. Have a great vacation. Yeah.
Exactly. What a beautiful family you have. Goodbye.
Yeah. Just stood there awkwardly while the time passed.
The worst. That says something about her. And also I also find it very funny later on where they're talking about that Valentine had basically given the exact same reading to both of them.
Yeah.
But when he gave her reading, and I like the competitiveness between the two of them, where they're saying, well, he said this to me. He said this to me. Well, I guess he says this to everybody because he said the same thing. And I don't know if he meant it with you. And then all of a sudden she's like, wait a second, that's not what he said to me. He said I was average. And then they're making fun of the way people eat in Texas. And she goes, I eat chicken. I eat beans. I just convinced myself to eat beans.
You know what? First of all, I give her credit for admitting what he said to her. True. Because she didn't have to. So I think that tells us something about her character, that she is somewhat honest, right? She didn't have to offer that up. It wouldn't have been dishonest to not offer it up, right? But she affirmatively says something that doesn't portray her in a comparable light to the other two. And I can totally relate to the idea of like, I convince myself to like this food because I'm supposed to. I've done that numerous times in my life.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so funny is because like we've all done that where, I would never eat that. We don't eat as much meat and my cholesterol level's higher. I never had cholesterol issues until I got older. So now it's like we just eat less meat. So it's like now we have a lot of beans in our food. It's just the way things are when you get to a certain age. And we like it because we gotta like it. So because it's better to not like it. It's interesting what you mention about her though, because she seems to be kind of guileless when prompted. She says negative things, but I do wonder if she's just kind of trying to please the person she's talking to, because she doesn't seem to be malicious in any of these things. Like when she's sitting there and honestly asking the lady, really, did you forget me? She seems to be a little like affronted by that, but not like not like her ego's in the way. She just seems surprised by the reaction. And the same thing in her being very honest in her interactions when the three of them are together. And also when you think about those one-on-ones where she's not the first one to talk, but once the other one starts goading her a little bit, then she kind of jumps in. So maybe she's just trying to make the other person happy. And maybe that's what's going to be happening here. She's going to keep getting pulled by one or the other. They're competing over her in some way.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Something to keep track of in the future. Who starts the smack talk?
Exactly. Although I would like to see her like kind of come to the fore. Maybe that's intentional, that she's kind of in her shell right now, but will emerge as the dominant one, which would be interesting as well, because we've really been seeing we're really seeing the Michelle Moynihan character first, and then our Monahan character. Now we're just starting to see the claws out from Laurie, the Carrie Coon character.
Can I tell a little anecdote just really quickly where I related to Kate very much?
Yeah, tell me.
I do think, and we'll talk about it, there's maybe something more behind Parker Posey's denial of ever recalling
absolutely.
her. Okay.
Yeah.
But if we were to take it on its face, every year we have a family vacation to the same location, and this location happens to have a brewery. And, breweries are great for small kids because they generally have a lot of space to run around. My kid always brings his soccer ball. He's obsessed with soccer. He will find kids to play soccer with, so everybody wins, right? You get to be in a pretty setting outdoors. Your kid is occupied. 2 years ago, he found a kid to play soccer with. Nothing unusual about that. We all said bye. This kid happened to be kind of distinctive looking. We go for a week every summer, generally the same week of the year. This past August/September, we were there. He ran into the exact same child playing soccer. And this family was from the Poconos in Pennsylvania. So very strange to me that like we went to this brewery once during our week-long trip and we ran into the exact same family from the Poconos. And so, of course, my group said to this family, isn't this crazy? These two boys played together last year. And they just said, yeah, I guess. Are you guys leaving? Can we have your table?
Oh, wow.
And wow, you were not impressed at all by this coincidence that we've run into each other again when we come to this place for maybe 3 hours over the course of a year, and our families were in the same place at the same time yet again, but they were completely unimpressed and just wanted our table.
Maybe they were just hangry.
Maybe.
Worse than that is I've had experiences where I've traveled with somebody and then afterwards like forgot that we travel together. So that is closer to what she's experiencing right there. I'm like, oh yeah, you were there. I don't actually remember you being there. I'm just saying that. Okay, the next thing I want to move over to is the dynamic between Rick and Chelsea, this couple, which I think in a way, like the girls, the three women, the gossipy ladies, they are obviously developing that. And that is a cliche of its own. The three girls kind of going and having that midlife experience together, and it's got its ups and its downs. It's like something that happens in rom-coms a lot. So they're not really breaking the mold there, even as the dynamic gets a little darker here.
True.
But it's almost expected that they're going to start turning on each other potentially. So that's in a way leaning into that particular cliche. This was surprising to me because when I watched last week and I saw Rick and Chelsea, especially when we saw the Greg relationship with his, paid girlfriend, that I'm like, oh, I see. This is the parallel. And of course, the show was telling us that. And I was saying, well, I don't know how long these people have been together. He's obviously her sugar daddy. So I made a lot of assumptions. And I got to tell you, this was the big surprise for me in the episode. Obviously, you have Walter Goggins, who's always great. And I was like, he's playing kind of a one-note character based on last week. And we're starting to see that hard exterior is not some con man. He might be a con man, by the way, but not this con man who's guarding himself warily, looking for his next target. He actually is a pretty damaged person. And most surprising of all is that this may be very much a sugar daddy relationship early on, but they seem to have a sincere dynamic with each other. I love the scene where he wakes up and he's trying to like push her off of him and she's still asleep and she like clings to him. There's like a real sweetness between the two of them. And she like even her pushing him into doing this thing that he's uncomfortable with. She really seems to care about him. And I think in his own way, especially when you see that tender lovemaking scene at the end, there is some warmth towards her as well, despite the fact that, given his horrible upbringing, he probably is wary of, showing any kind of sensitivity or any kind of emotion. I was really surprised with this, and I really liked this whole storyline.
It was a nice surprise. And I think when he dismisses Gary, we'll call him now.
Yes, I guess he's Gary now, yes.
Gary and his French-Canadian girlfriend's relationship.
I love that dynamic, yeah.
She's an escort. It makes it clear that he sees their dynamic as something much different than Gary and the escort, that they have something real in comparison to that.
Absolutely. There's so much funny dialogue here too. I love how she busts his chops constantly because you guys will get along. And he's like, why do you think that? It's just like, you're both old men. Yes. Although Walter Goggins looks really good for his age. Obviously, I think he's probably like pushing 60 at this point, still in great shape. And they even call that out, right? How the French-Canadian girl is like, he's in good shape for his age. He's like, he is indeed. Greg, by the way, I don't know how old he is, but for his age, he's holding it together too. Not as well as Walter Goggins, though, but none of us are going to be that blessed, just to be honest. Oh, and really important here, I think, the revelations during that conversation. His mother died of a drug overdose. His dad was murdered, according to what they're saying here, and I do have a question about that. I like him saying that his stress level is 8 out of 10 all the time, which is, of course, sad to contemplate. And his obsession with finding this Jim Hollinger character. And also, you have seen, you looked him up last week because you didn't know what I was talking about, but you look at Scott Glenn, another wiry guy. I think that there's an implication of, regardless of what he said, his father was murdered. Maybe he means his father, like the person who raised him. Father figure, correct. Rather than a father, because his obsession with tracking this guy down, do you think there might be some kind of father connect, or he's looking for his dad?
I think that makes sense on paper, but the character that we've seen seems like someone who would write off his father as being useless, worthless, not something he was going to pursue. I don't feel like this character would be invested in finding his father. Unless maybe there's some reason, maybe there's some external motive besides the familial relationship. Maybe he needs a kidney. I don't know.
Well, oh my God, that's actually not a bad guess, considering that the father's been sick recently. But and maybe he was asking him for a kidney, and that's how he tracked him down in the first place. Now you put that in my head. But based on last week, what I was thinking, even before we knew about this biography of his, was that he wanted revenge against this guy. And of course, someone's going to get shot. So there's that whole thing hanging over the entire show. Maybe this is the guy who killed his father. That's the other possibility. And he's finally tracked him down.
Could be. Yeah, that could be.
All remains to be seen.
To me, someone who defines themselves as like the tank is empty.
Yes.
Wouldn't have the wherewithal to track down his father for reasons of emotional closure. Like, it just seems like a resignation to the state of your life and that it can never change. Because to me, the natural next question would be, so how can I fill that tank? But he didn't seem interested in filling the tank.
Correct. This is my dark reading of all of this. We don't know if he's a multimillionaire going to this exclusive resort. He might be burning through his life savings on this journey. And
because if he doesn't get a kidney, he's going to die.
No, I mean, like
build out this story.
If he truly does believe that he has nothing in the tank, and he is nothing, he literally says, if you have nothing in your tank, and you have nothing to put in it, then you are nothing. So if he really feels that nihilistic about himself, then maybe this is a death run that he's on. And part of that is this revenge, right? So that's my, very film noirish interpretation of what might be going on here. It's possible. And maybe that is part of his discomfort of having actual feelings for this girl, is that would be something to anchor him to this life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want to talk about the armed robbery, which was shocking. Another shock. There's never been anything violent on this show, except obviously the deaths at the end. But it's like you're kind of on cruise control as you watch the show, and you do not expect people to be smashing glasses and pulling out guns and threatening people's lives in the middle of the show, especially this early in the show. So that was a real big surprise. But before we get into that and who these people might be, because I have some theories as to who we might be seeing there, let's kind of set the table there with the hotel staff itself. Maybe we just start with Belinda again. She is probably going to be much more important to the plot as it progresses. I do like her waking up. By the way, my experience when I used to travel all the time, waking up in the morning and literally looking at the ceiling and being like, where am I now?
So disorienting.
And of course, she wakes up. She has no idea where she is. Understood. I've been there myself. Then we have the continuing romance between Mook and Gaitak. And we kind of see that thing where I'm like, why is she maybe negging him a little bit, or what that was? But we see now that they have almost like a brother and sister relationship. He's known her for a long time. They work together. So maybe there is just like that familiarity. She just takes him for granted. But she does seem to accept a possible date with him.
Yes, I was watching this with my husband, actually, and he pointed out after their conversation, she never said no.
Exactly. So... and by the way, like, this is, of course, putting the thumb on my expectations, but in this season on the White Lotus that we saw last week, we see her dressed up and they are together somewhere eating or drinking, which, of course, seems to be a date. So they're not in their work year. So yes, I think she didn't say no, which could be a yes. And are you in favor of this romance?
I don't know enough about the characters and especially about Mook. I have questions about her. She seems like Gaitak seems solid and like a stand-up type of guy from what we've seen, right? He helps her when the bike is not working. He's doing his best as a security guard and gets a head injury because of it. She seems like maybe she's very sweet or maybe she's a little shady. I can't tell yet.
I get shady vibes from her, but it seems like the show is very much trying to tell us, at least the characters in the show all seem to see her as this, oh, she's so sweet. She's so sweet. That in a way is also part of the reason I'm thinking maybe that is saying something about the stereotype of the polite, servile Asian woman. And maybe she could be a wolf in sheep's clothing for all we know. So I don't know if she's going to be like some grand villain, but she may just be more
a mastermind. Yeah.
She may just be more, she may be more complicated than she appears to be.
I mean, she's very pretty, but also she has a real adorableness to her.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes you not suspect her of being capable of things that are mean or shady, but she might be.
Oh, back to Belinda, by the way. She has, she's hanging out with Porn Chai, is this other employee there, and they are training each other. He's like, give me your favorite treatment and I'll give you mine first. And when he walks in his boxer briefs, she gets a little flush there. So, I mean, do you think that this is going to turn into a romance between the two of them? What do you think is indicated here?
I hope it does. I'm not sure what I think will happen, but I hope it happens. I would love to see that.
I like when he asks, do you want me on my back or on my stomach? And
yes.
She says, on my stomach. Okay, character that has been a standout in previous seasons, not working for me here, speaking of the staff once again, is the Fabian character. The whole awkward, oh, everybody's going to show off their talents. Oh, I even practiced to sing. Oh, are you going to sing? No, I would never sing. Oh, maybe I will sing. All of that is, I don't know. This character is just not gelling for me yet. Did you have any impressions of him?
Yeah, not well-defined enough yet. Hopefully he will become more well-defined. But right now, there's just not enough to go on either way. He's just kind of in the background.
Yeah, they have not given him enough screen time, but I assume he's going to become more pivotal considering, as I mentioned last week, this is like an up-and-coming actor. So I assume there'll be more for him to do. these have been quirky characters in previous seasons, obviously. They're
Yes.
trying to make him, funny and charismatic, or, having his own kind of charisma, like we saw, for example, in season 2, which was such a great character, that flustered, master of ceremonies there at the hotel. And like you said, we haven't really spent much time with him yet. So maybe it's just to come, but it's not working for me right now. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, I get that.
And do you have any opinion so far on Shritala so far? Beautiful voice, by the way, beautiful singing voice. But anything else on this shady, owning this resort or running it with her husband, and this diva-ishness she has to her, which of course is probably part of her appeal, probably part of the reason people come to this resort if they are familiar with her. Do you have any read on her yet beyond that surface level?
No, I don't terribly mind her. She seems like she's going to be just a plot device more than anything else, as a conduit between Rick and the husband, possibly, right? I feel neutral about her. I don't necessarily need to know more about her, I will say.
And you're absolutely correct, by the way, that in the upcoming scenes, we see Rick is talking to her, even positioning himself as potentially like someone who could get her some, appearances in the US, like he's got some kind of talent agent or something. So he's obviously going to try to use her as a lever to get to her husband. And unfortunately, maybe that's all she has. Although I have to say, I hope she has more to this, because I think this actress has a real charisma to her. I really like seeing her perform. Whenever she's on screen, she holds the screen, but they don't give her that much to do yet. She, like you said, she's just like kind of the way to get from point A to point B. I do hope that she becomes a more complex character. All right, let's talk about the robbery, the actual logistics of it. So Gaitak is at the security station. Valentine comes up and is like, hey, I got tickets to this mixed martial art fight I'm going to be in, and my friend's in it. And at first I'm like, wow, this guy's doing a lot of palling around with this guy. Like, we have not seen this before. And Gaitak's trying to be like, oh yeah, I want to hang out with the cool guy. And I'm like, what is this all about? And then, of course, the heist, the attack. I'm like, this was a distraction, obviously.
Sure seems like it.
So there's somebody who's involved, one. More interestingly, then when he gets attacked, they seem to be flustered. Like, they definitely didn't want him to get hurt. So it's probably other people on the resort who definitely don't want to hurt him. But most important of all is that the third guy in the car pops out. He sees him. He does not have a mask on. He sees this person, full face. We don't see it. We only see the back of his head. They make eye contact, so he knows exactly who he is. Then it's when he gets hit with the gun and knocked out. When he wakes up, he doesn't say, I saw blah, blah, blah. So he knows exactly who that person was. And that's interesting. So he has a secret for some reason. Maybe he's protecting somebody. Maybe he doesn't know this person, and it's just going to turn up later that he'll see this person who, got out of the car and without a mask on, and he now knows more than he should. But my assumption is he knows who this person is and probably can suss out who this trio are via that.
That is what it seemed like to me as well.
Do you have any guesses as to the rest of this? I immediately was thinking this is somehow coordinated. It could be like Greg is doing something shady, but I'm like, it can't be Greg. This guy is way too fit, way too, he doesn't move like an old man at all. So it's probably one of these younger guys on the resort. It could even be, there's multiple pretty fit guys in the cast, in the, the actual staff that we've already met. So it could be one of those guys. But yeah, they do really... they are very careful to cover everything. He's wearing gloves. He's wearing the mask. He's got sunglasses on. He's got the hat pulled down. So I was like looking for any clue, like an eyebrow. I couldn't get any clear look on this guy. So I'm like, I don't know who it was. They did and obviously the fact that they're hiding his identity so thoroughly, I'm almost certain it's someone we've already seen in the show.
But what do you think about the fact that the French-Canadian girl, whose name is escaping me, made sure I'm already giving you some of what I might think. So is that to say, made sure she was in the fitting room at the time that this occurred, happened to be in the fitting room at the time that this occurred. And this whole idea of, she had this argument and she made sure to get the credit card, and the store has lots of great stuff. I mean, who really goes shopping in the hotel shop? I guess some people do, but I personally am there, like, if I need a Tylenol or something. I mean, just coincidence or more? What do you think?
Right. Chloe is the character's name. That is very questionable. So maybe this, even if it is the staff, maybe this was coordinated by Greg, Gary, because it is very suspicious. She is there. She's tucked away the entire time. She doesn't come out until after, because you could imagine that, if you're in a dressing room at some store and you start hearing something outside, even if you just hear the glass breaking, you'll be like, oh my God, someone must have like broken something. Let me go see, right? You don't like say, I'm going to hide here because someone's robbing the store. That's not where your mind goes first. Right. As a matter of fact, like I was shocked that it happened in the episode. I'm sure if I was at a resort and someone came in, my first thought wouldn't be like, oh, of course we're being robbed.
Right, exactly. You assume it's so random. Yeah,
it's not going to happen. That's exactly the type of thing you're getting away from where you are. I wouldn't be surprised if he is somehow involved in this thing, because it is very suspicious. Yeah, I think you make a really good point. You can imagine Chloe goes in, she scouts the place out, sends a text message, disappears into the dressing room. Greg passes the message on to whoever it is, Valentine and or not Valentine. Well, all of them. I guess it's 3 people, right? Valentine's there to distract. Truck rolls through. They're in and out. And the only thing that doesn't go to plan is that he takes too much action. The guy talk who actually tries to do the right thing.
Yes, I mean, really does. I mean, he tried to physically get involved when he knows this guy has a gun, right? So
yeah, exactly. And this is also goes back to the date or not date with Mook earlier on. She is sympathetic. She's worried about him when he is attacked. And maybe that is part of the fact that she's going to accept this date. Always take advantage of those type of things. Oh, also very importantly, I think here after the robbery, Chelsea goes back and tells Rick about it, and Rick is very concerned for her, right? So this is once again you see him being like very like she's always harassing me, but then when that happens, he seemed very concerned for her. So I thought that was also another sign of that he's truly in love with her, whether he'll show it or not. He really is.
You want to do the dinner they have together? Because I love that too.
So then that night, just to bring all those characters together, we see Greg / Gary. Love the dynamic, like you mentioned. All of this is terrific. I like Chelsea constantly prodding him, like, go talk to the other old guy. Go ahead. Look, you guys are both old.
You're both losing your hair.
You're both losing your hair. He's like, I'm not losing my hair. I don't think Walter Goggins is losing his hair. He would have lost it by now. You might be receding, though, a little bit. You're both losing your hair. It's hilarious. The connection between the two of them. And of course, he's just like, well, what do you do? And Greg's like, oh, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, maybe a little bit armed robbery, a little bit, or coordinated armed robbery at the local resort.
A little bit of conspiracy to murder.
Exactly. Murdering my wife. You have to think if something's going on with his inheritance for sure, because if he cleanly inherited her money, pulling off this heist at this resort seems to be small beans for somebody who's inheriting as much money as he supposedly is.
Maybe it's tied up while they're investigating the death.
True. That's a very good point. Yeah, especially if there's connections between him and this guy back in season 2. Spoilers for season 2 if you haven't watched that. But we won't spoil anymore. But definitely check out season 2. Great season of television.
Yeah, amazing.
What else did you want to bring up about this conversation? Oh, one thing that's important, I'll just mention it here as well in passing, is that Belinda sees him and recognizes him. And then she seems very frustrated. And I couldn't get a read on that. Is she frustrated because she's like, I know that guy, but I can't place it? Or is she frustrated because she's like, oh, that's the husband of that lady who promised me, she'd help me out, and she never did. Did you get a full read on that scene?
I thought it was the first one.
Yeah, I think so too.
That's kind of how I took it. I personally have a very big issue with seeing people out of context and understanding who they are when they're not in the place that I've seen them 100% of the time up until that day. Maybe I was, relating to that feeling of when you see someone and you think, why can't I place them? And it's because they're, in this case, tens of thousands of miles away from the last place you saw them.
Exactly. A very good point.
So yeah, that's how I took it. What I loved about this dinner is, again, just the point of relation of like the couples dinner, right? Where I've become friends with somebody, and so now we've decided the 4 of us should go out together.
That's
and my husband is just like dragging his feet the entire time,
Yep.
complaining about it all day. Why do we have to do this? And then you get them together and you're like, talk to each other. Like, it's almost like you're on a play date. Like, come on, you guys have so much in common. You're going to like each other. We already know. So like, just get to warm up. I thought that this and that answer countered by Rick's "me too, I also do this and that" was great.
Right. So again, of course, we're drawing these connections between the characters for sure, and these two couples. I especially once again love. Well, you brought it up already, but I love the the you're French, and she's like French Canadian, and he's like, "What's the difference?" And she's so offended by this. It's hilarious. It's like I live in Canada. There's quite a difference. Absolutely true. Just because you speak the same language does not make you culturally the same.
Very true.
All right. Getting all of that out of the way, I guess we got to talk about the Ratcliff family.
Here we are with the
We have
disturbing
arrived
family
at my
that they
least
keep putting
favorite
in our
destination.
face.
In my power rankings of the plots I care about, still bringing up the tail. It's what's happening with the Ratcliff family.
But I still am interested in the father's subplot.
A little bit.
It's the weird dynamics between the children that
Yes.
I never need to see again, to be honest.
And Victoria, the Parker Posey character, once again, Mike White is a good writer. He, even with season one, even with the worst aspects of season one, he humanizes those characters and he does something with them. So I'm sure there's more to be revealed here. But at this moment, 2 episodes in, I really don't like spending time with these people across the board. Like I'm slightly interested in going like, what is the revelation of this scam that the dad is caught up in a little bit, but Parker Posey, who I really like as a performer, by the way, not vibing with this performance that much. And the kids, the kids not working for me.
Our generation, those of us that loved indie films and whatever, right? Like Parker Posey is a sweetheart for us. We'll always have that fondness for her. This is so against the type of character that she normally plays as well. For me, I think I'm processing a lot on the Parker Posey level of her being, solidly middle-aged. And I mean, of course she is, but, I remember her as a young adult actress. And this type of role of like a Southern housewife that is doped out on lorazepam, like all of it is a lot to process for those of us who grew up with Parker Posey. So yeah, I get it, but I still like it.
She could play neurotic. I mean, that's definitely been part of what she's played in the past. Although, I prefer her in that, like what we were growing up in, that whole, like the quirky girl, like, kind of like the lovably quirky girl. Maybe this is the soured version of that character 20 years later, possibly. I mean, it's a little one note for me, I would say. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Victoria, up until now, is once again, a lot of comic relief here, even in the way she's trying to order food for the room, and she's trying to pronounce all the words properly, like as if she's like inventing pronunciations for the meals and trying to make it sound like she knows what she's talking about, which I found entertaining.
I felt like she did get the hang of the Thai by the end of her order. She really...
it's like she was working her way through it.
Yeah, she really improved between ordering the first snack and like the fourth one. She really got the rhythm of it.
Maybe I'm being a little ungenerous there. Maybe she's listening to the person on the phone who's reciting it back to her, and she is improving. So maybe, I've done that before where I completely mispronounced some dish, then they recite it back to me, and then I'm like, oh, and I have a similar dish. So then I know how to pronounce it.
As awkward as that conversation with Kate was to watch, I did like the way I was entertained by her side of the conversation about, oh, sure. Yeah, I know that person. I was there. And like clearly just saying like, no recollection of what you're trying to tell me about you personally. Maybe your hair was different. and Kate were like trying to kind of give her an out, right? And Kate's like, maybe. And you can tell Kate is the type of woman who's had the same hairstyle for 20 years. And I liked when Kate walked away, the kids kind of call her out, like that was a little bit rude.
Yeah.
And her response of like the baby shower was 10 years ago. The way Kate was talking, I assumed the baby shower was at least within the last 5 years. I do think if someone was trying to bring up to me a baby shower from 10 years ago.
10 years ago, yeah.
I also might be like, wow, okay, yeah, we were both there. Although it did seem like they spent a lot of time together, the way Kate phrased it.
Yeah, they spent the entire weekend together, they said.
Right, so maybe not. I got a lot of enjoyment out of the way that character handled that conversation and the awkward feeling it gave me.
I do agree, by the way, that regardless of everything she's saying is probably true, and kind of being like, why would I remember someone from 10 years ago, even if I did spend the weekend with them? Give me a break. And why is she making a big deal out of it? Which, of course, the kids bring up a good point. It's like, maybe she's just trying to be polite. But I do wonder if something happened. There was some bad interaction there, because there seems to be more to that story.
Yeah, sure. I agree with you.
All right. So let's talk about these kids. Saxon slept in the nude. We have to see him naked again here in front of his brother. I'm like, what is happening? What is happening?
It's a threshold question that my husband asked me that you and I should have discussed, and we didn't.
Okay.
Are these three siblings all biologically related?
I thought the same. I was wondering the same thing. Yes.
Because it is having a feel of a blended family.
Yes, yes.
And I'm hoping at this point that it is somewhat a blended family, because it will make it marginally less upsetting. If you had to guess, is this a blended family, and how are they blended?
Yes, I was thinking the same thing even last week, but I didn't really, since the show had not made any reference to it at all. And the mom and the husband seem so similar that, it's kind of feels like a couple that's been together for way too long. But it is possible that maybe the husband had a first marriage. Saxon, the older one, is from the first marriage, but then they would still be half brothers, which is still very strange. I mean, very creepy, to say the least.
Wait, break that down for me again. I'm sorry, I didn't follow. How do you think they're blended?
Saxon was from a different mom via the father's side. This is what I was guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Other siblings, the younger ones, are both Victoria's. They're still half siblings, though. Just
interesting.
Creepy. What did you think?
I think so. You don't think any of them are joint children from both the parents? I just want to make sure I have this right.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You think I was saying only Victoria. Maybe that's the case, and then that would make a little more sense. I was saying that the two younger kids are Victoria and Thomas. This is so they would be, in my version of this, they're half siblings. So the same father, different mother.
Everybody has the same father.
Yes.
We're going to need a family tree for this. For some reason, my mind is having a hard time tracking this. Something I noticed, I'm not sure what conclusion it should draw me to. The mom laughs very hard at a lot of inappropriate stuff from Saxon.
Oh, good point. So then she might be closer with him. Yes.
So then my original instinct was then like, they must be bio related.
Yeah.
Because these are things but see, then I think maybe it's a step parent situation trying to ingratiate herself, because these are things as a parent, I would be like, WTF, why are you talking like that?
Right.
I'm not sure which side I come down on. I'm like couching this with every precaution. I think Saxon and the sister are not related, because that at least would make it a little less creepy, the way he's talking about her. And I guess I feel like Lachlan and the sister are related.
Then how would that work?
They took logic puzzles off the LSAT, but this is sounding like a logic puzzle from the LSAT. And I think the sister resembles Parker Posey. Okay, now I'm going with Parker Posey is the stepmom of Saxon and the bio mom of Victoria and Lachlan.
That's the same. See, do we end up
in the same place?
As confused as I explained myself before. That was the same place we were going. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that would have to be the case, because Saxon is the older, right? So it wouldn't make sense that she would be, because then he would have had kids with someone else while he was married to her. If she's the bio mom of Saxon, right?
I can't rule out that Saxon is the dad's, Victoria's is the mom, Lachlan is both of theirs.
That's the other possibility, and maybe that would make more sense. They have one shared child, and then they have kids from previous marriages, and that would explain, yes.
And the thing about like, you shouldn't be sharing a bedroom now, it makes a little more sense for step siblings than it does for real siblings.
Yeah, even though they're close in age, so they may have grown up in the same bedroom.
Yeah. I mean, I'm an only child, so I don't really know, but I feel like there would be nothing wrong with sharing a bedroom with your sibling on vacation, regardless of how old you are.
Yeah, I think that is probably what we're talking about here. So the youngest is theirs together, and the others are from previous marriages. By the way, just having this conversation has made this whole dynamic less creepy for me. Right.
It helps a little bit.
It does. A little bit. Yeah, so let's talk about that dynamic, because obviously we have this whole weird thing where he has to be naked in front of his brother all the time, which is just strange, to say the least. But then, of course, he's so annoying, getting, aroused during his massage, expecting to get more than he gets. And then so irritating when he can't find his blender for his protein shake. All of this is just like nails on a chalkboard for me.
Agree with you.
Although there does seem to be, Chloe seems to be a little bit of attracted to him, right? When he walks by later on, one of the girls is like, oh, he's so annoying. And the other one was like, cute though. So maybe that's a clue that if he's going to hook up with anyone, he'll hook up with Chloe, who probably does not committed to her relationship, let's say. And then, of course, there's the scene where Lachlan and Piper are, I've never seen this before, this kind of thing where you're floating in the water, but in a hammock at the same time. That's kind of interesting.
It looked awesome, didn't it?
It did, right? Yeah. It's such a beautiful locale too.
Wondering, like, is this high tide? Is this the highest it gets?
Right?
Or, right? Like, it's so interesting.
It better not get higher, that's for sure.
That's what I was thinking. You fall asleep
might drown
and then all
in
of a sudden
sleep.
you wake up feeling like you're being waterboarded or something. Yeah, but it looked amazing.
And he's actually gone for a deprivation tank therapy. I've always wanted to do this, by the way. Have you ever done this?
No, but I'm claustrophobic, so I don't think it would work for me.
Yeah. I always wanted to try that because I hear that people like deprive all your senses. You get a real intense meditation.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be amazing if you're not having
a
nervous breakdown, which is what would happen to me. Yes.
During that hammock scene, he has this conversation bringing up the fact that Saxon said she was hot and that she was still a virgin, and she gets really upset by this. I mean, obviously you could just imagine her being like, ew, he's gross or whatever. There's more going on here. Do you have any feel for what's going on here?
I thought it was just, she knows he's a creep, but he didn't realize that he's this creepy. Yeah. And so that's why she's just marveling at his new level of creepiness that he's ascended to. But maybe there's more.
And what do you think is going on with Lachlan? We hinted at the fact that maybe there's something going on with his sexuality, but there is, speaking of a triangle here, it's interesting. If there's a parallel going on here, he's in Kate's role here. It seems to be like, depending on who he's with, like he laughs at the inappropriate joke when that seems to be the case. But then he seems to be closer to the sister, but then says this to the sister to kind of feel her out. And then when she gets upset, he plays it off like, oh, I didn't think you were going to get that upset. So it's almost like he's not sure of himself as a person in general.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And then there, of course, is, speaking of the sexuality aspect to it, there is the scene where they are getting served by this, it's something culturally common in Thailand, at least anecdotally, that there are these like lady boys that they call them. Was that a woman or was that a man? And then the dad was saying, well, things are different out here. Right. That joke, that inappropriate joke, is actually pretty funny, I gotta say. It's a little bit funny. I did laugh a little.
I thought it was going towards a Forrest Gump direction.
Yes.
You never know what you're going to get, which I mean is the point, but
yes, exactly.
A little more graphic.
I haven't heard that version of it. I thought it was kind of funny. A little rude, but still. Once again, the fact that they are siblings, even if they're, not blood siblings, and this constant fixation of all the people here, even when the ladies are saying, oh, you should try to hook up with Valentine. You're the single one, make a move. In the scenes for next week, it does seem to be like she does do a little flirtation. Maybe she's testing the waters there to see if he's interested. So there does seem to be some aspects of sexuality here in the show. For the fact of the show that the fixation on sexuality is among these siblings has been really creepy for me so far. And for you.
I agree. And not wanted on my part at all.
Yes. In general, that's not a good look.
Yeah, I mean, I loved, like last season was a lot about sexual dynamics and with the couples, with Ethan and Daphne, and I can't remember the other names, but Harper and whoever Theo James was. I loved that. I mean, that was amazing.
Oh, that was great. All that sexual competition and all that dislike by
Harper,
right, which really kind of hid a sexual attraction. All that stuff is so much fun in the context of couples, yes.
Adults, yes.
Exactly.
That are not related to each other.
They're not children, they're adults. But when it is like siblings, it's just like the same dynamic there. I'm like, no, please. Stop.
Right. I'm not opposed to exploring sexual themes. It's just not in this context, please.
I'm sure there'll be some payoff. It's for me, I agree. It's just kind of little skin crawl.
Because every time we talk, I have to make a reference to a 30-year-old movie. This, now that we're talking about siblings, is reminding me of Cruel Intentions. Remember that movie?
Oh, yeah. There you
with,
go.
Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Yes.
And Ryan Phillippe. And I think it's been a long, long time. I think there was something going on there, sexual, between step siblings.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And they were a very wealthy city family, not from South, but so maybe something parallel to that is happening here.
Cruel Intentions moved to Thailand.
That's right. Okay, sorry, but let's go back to the dad, who I really am actually interested in this storyline.
Yeah, so apparently there's some kind of money laundering going on. By the way, I don't know if he's going to be in the show, but I recognize right away the voice on the phone. This is Ki Hugh Kwan, who of course just won the Academy Award a couple of years ago for Everything Everywhere All at Once. Speaking of a movie reference from not 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
Yes.
This was like, obviously he's been in so many things back when we were kids, even Head of the Class. Remember, he was on that for years. And then his career like dried up in like 1990 or so. But he was still working, by the way. He was doing like stunt choreography and things in Hong Kong movies, but of course made a huge comeback recently. And he's in a movie right now and playing in theaters called Love Hurts, I think it's called.
Oh.
And that came out at Valentine's Day. But anyway, maybe he'll be on the show because, I mean, this is a pretty big guest for somebody to just do a cameo on the phone. Minimally, we're going to have a lot more phone conversations with him for sure. So, but remains to be seen. It makes me feel like he's going to actually pop up on the show at some point. Do you have a feel for this at all? He's saying, I only got $10 million out of this. So apparently he's making it sound like he is so rich that $10 million is nothing. But then it makes me ask the question, as oftentimes just seeded by the fact that a lot of times in movies and shows, people who are presenting themselves as really wealthy are kind of just hanging on by their fingernails. So for him to take such a huge risk for only $10 million makes me feel like maybe he needed that $10 million. But maybe it's been more ironic if he's like a billionaire and his whole empire is going to go down because he's so greedy that $10 million more bankrupts him.
Yeah, it feels like a robbing Peter to pay Paul situation or whatever that phrase is. Because this family, while they do come off as wealthy, and we did have that little lecture about from Parker Posey about what their romantic partner's true intentions are, and you want to make sure that they're not using you for your money. Despite that, they don't exude that level of wealth, right? Of being like so crazy, filthy, rich that $10 million is nothing, right? So I'm thinking he had some kind of debt to pay.
Yeah. I also feel like even the other people who are here, like even if Greg lives nearby and they're like, oh, you must be really rich if you live nearby, that says something. But if he's now robbing, pulling off these heists, for example, it's like, how rich is he really? And then, you're in Thailand. So rich in Thailand, probably not as rich as downtown London, right? So real estate prices are probably not comparable. If you could guess at this moment, do you think that we're going to have his entire collapse of his illusion of his life is going to happen in the context of this show so that he has like some kind of confrontation with his family about the reality of what's happening? Or do you think he's going to try to hide this from the family? Because considering we only have like 1 week there, it's going to kind of hang over him that now we're going back to the United States. As soon as we land, my family's now suddenly going to know the truth.
I feel like it's going to be the second scenario that you presented.
Because they're not allowed to have phones and things. So like they're out of the loop until, maybe the last. It could be interesting to have him have to deal with this with his family, have this conversation during this actual trip. I just feel like there's not enough real estate here to deal with that potentially. It's more interesting to me, the idea that they're having this luxurious trip and they're still living in the fantasy. And he knows that it's all going to end as soon as they get on that plane.
And I think we will learn more about what's going on with him over the course of the week, but I don't think he's going to disclose it to his family. That's my sense of it.
Honestly, I prefer that. I think it's a more interesting way to take the story.
Agree.
Then another scene of him being like, it's all a lie. We lost it all. I'm
Right.
like, okay, we've seen that. I mean, more expected. And I think that's pretty much it. Do you have any guess yet as to who is dead?
Oh gosh.
You don't have to, by the way. Don't have to.
No, I don't have a guess, but I am growing more attached to certain characters, so I hope it's not them. But that's about it. I hope it's not Rick or Chelsea. I've grown fond of them.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, I like these three blonde ladies that are on vacation together. What are you thinking?
I honestly still don't know. There's multiple times in this episode where they're like saying, what was that thing that Greg said? Like Timothy says, I'll kill you if this blows up in my face on the phone. Obviously, the show is constantly making us think, well, maybe this is what's going to happen. Maybe this is what's going to happen, which is the game this show always plays, which is,
right.
Obviously why it's been successful. And I always feel like this early in the going, it's not going to be any of those things, right? So
if I try and draw parallels with the prior seasons, the first season, I was kind of disappointed with who it was, I think. I felt like it should have been.
Especially because it's like the best character in the show.
I felt like it was going to be somebody visiting the hotel. The second season, I was surprised that they did that. So both seasons, I've been surprised, is my point. So I'm not even going to try and hazard a guess.
And I'm sure this is a game that will continue from episode to episode. There will always be like 2 or 3 candidates that seem to be most likely.
And I hope it's not guy talk too. I'm growing fond of
Yes, same thing here. I hope it's not guy talk. I have to say with season 2 that it wasn't only surprising as to how it landed, like who it was in the end. I also thought that for me, it was satisfying in the fact that the bad guys don't get away with it. And yet it still happens in a way. Right? So it was a very clever way to wrap things up. For me, I know some people, it was more divisive. But for me, I thought it was a clever way to do it.
I mean, I think it kept consistent with the quirkiness of the show that with all that was happening, the final undoing was just a misstep, essentially.
Exactly. Like, take those heels off, lady.
Yeah, really, take the heels off.
All right. So that is episode 2. We will look forward to episode 3. Once again, everybody out there, any feedback? YouTube, sure, go there. Email us, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com. Recommend us to your friends and family if they're watching White Lotus or not. Recommend the show and our podcast at the same time. Check out our other episodes. We're talking about Paradise. Only 2 episodes left of Paradise. We have 4 more episodes of Severance as well. Another episode later this week. And the Academy Awards are next week, and I really don't care. Although it does seem now that Anora is frontrunner for this, and I loved Anora. So if it wins and a lot of people see the movie, I can't wait for that to happen. One of the lesser movies wins, I probably won't watch it anyway, and then I probably won't care either. I mean, in general, for me, I don't care about that show anymore. I do like when something I actually like wins, because then I know more people will watch it. It still matters to some people for some reason. Are you a fan at all, Sona, of the Academy Awards?
I'm not a fan of awards shows generally. I feel like, and I mean, many industries do this type of awarding, and it's just not as publicized because people outside the industry aren't interested. But
don't care.
It just feels so self-congratulatory to me that, I can't be really interested in everybody patting themselves on the back like this. But again, to be fair, I think every industry does it. It's just not broadcast and nobody cares what we wear. It lost its novelty for me a long time ago.
Like I mentioned, the only thing I would care about is I do want to see Anora win, because it is not a giant Hollywood production that's been they spend tens of millions of dollars promoting this to win the Academy Award and do expensive trips for the voters and such. It is a small film, is just really great. It's like the best movie of the year, in my opinion, or very near the top of the best movies of the year. I'm sure it's already become very popular, much more popular than it was in theaters because of the nominations. It's always near the top of the streaming chart, the rental charts. And of course, if it wins Best Picture, it will get tons more attention and tons more views. All in favor of that for a great film, especially if it's a small film, because, if it's already made $700 million, then who else is going to watch it anyway? So I'm glad. Although, honestly, when you have a film like this become a front runner, the ratings are probably pretty bad because they're not rooting for the big blockbuster, right? So it's a double-edged sword. I don't really know the merit of these type of award shows anymore, but it is coming up this week. People will watch them, and people do act like it matters, although it really doesn't. But it does help sell more tickets, so I guess in that way. The nominees are pretty good, by the way. Most of them are actually pretty good, so I don't have too much criticism about what they nominated this year, except for Amelia Perez, which looked like it was going to win, which is absolutely horrible.
Okay.
All right, Sona, thank you again for the conversation.
Thank you.
All right, talk to you soon.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.